The airport was bustling with travelers, moving in every direction. A sea of rolling suitcases and hurried footsteps echoing across the tiled floor. Among them was Denise Carter, a poised and confident black woman whose presence commanded attention. She was dressed simply in a dark suit, her hair neatly pulled back, and her eyes scanning her surroundings with quiet precision. Though she appeared like any other passenger, her mind was trained to notice details most people overlooked. Denise had traveled through countless airports, but today's flight was different. Her mission was classified, and her identity needed to remain carefully shielded. She approached the check-in counter, presenting her ID as she had done thousands of times before. The pilot, who had stationed himself near the gate, leaned over and glanced at her card. For reasons only he understood, suspicion immediately flickered across his face. He narrowed his eyes as though the very existence of Denise standing before him was some sort of offense. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken tension. Denise, calm and composed, kept her expression neutral, aware that hostility often escalated when matched. She simply waited for the man to hand back her identification so she could continue. Instead. The pilot smirked in a way that made Denise's skin prickle. Without warning, he produced a lighter from his pocket, flicked it on, and held her ID over the flame. The plastic curled and blackened within seconds, smoke rising as the card shriveled into ash. Gasps erupted from nearby passengers who couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Denise stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the pilot, not in shock but in measured calculation. The silence that followed was sharper than any accusation she could have spoken aloud. The pilot's act wasn't random, it was an expression of arrogance, a statement that her presence was unwanted, perhaps even threatening to him. He chuckled, brushing the ash from his fingers, expecting Denise to explode in anger or protest. Instead, she remained steady, her calm demeanor rattling him more than outrage ever could. Her silence forced the crowd to direct their attention entirely on him. He shifted uncomfortably under the collective gaze, but tried to mask his unease with bravado. Muttering something about fake IDs and security risks, Denise allowed him to finish, waiting for the perfect moment. The pilot leaned closer, sneering. "You don't belong here." Those words were his mistake. With deliberate precision, Denise reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black leather case. She flipped it open in one smooth motion, revealing a gold badge gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. The crowd inhaled collectively, eyes widening as the words became visible. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Director. The pilot's smirk evaporated instantly, his face draining of color as if the life had been sucked out of him. He staggered back a step, the weight of his reckless act crashing down on him. Gasps turned into whispers, rippling across the waiting passengers like electricity. "She's the director," someone murmured. The revelation sent shockwaves through the terminal. For the first time in his career, the pilot found himself utterly powerless, caught in a web of his own prejudice and arrogance. Denise didn't need to raise her voice. Her authority was undeniable. Her gaze locked on the man, cold and unwavering, stripping away every layer of his false superiority. The badge in her hand was not just a symbol of power, but of the truth he had tried to burn out of existence. Security rushed over, alerted by the commotion. The pilot stammered, his words tumbling incoherently, trying to justify his actions. I thought it was fake. I thought she was dangerous." His excuses sounded hollow, crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The security officers stood frozen, realizing who Denise truly was, and immediately deferred to her authority. She spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the noise. This man just destroyed government property and violated federal law. There was no room for argument. No chance for him to wriggle free. The once confident pilot was reduced to a trembling figure. Denise's composure never faltered. She instructed the security team with calm precision, her tone commanding yet measured. The pilot was handcuffed on the spot, his protests echoing across the terminal, but ignored by everyone. Passengers who had witnessed the scene began to applaud quietly. Not for the humiliation of the pilot, but for the unwavering dignity with which Denise had handled the ordeal. She didn't revel in his downfall. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken louder than fire, louder than arrogance, louder than hate. She turned away, ready to continue her journey. Still, the weight of the moment lingered. Denise knew this incident would ripple far beyond a single airport terminal. The pilot's actions exposed an ugly truth that too many people still lived with daily assumptions made on skin color. Power abused without consequence. Yet today, consequence had arrived swiftly. Dressed in the form of a black woman who held one of the most powerful positions in the country, Denise didn't need to prove her worth. The badge wasn't validation, but a reminder that authority comes from integrity, not prejudice. As she walked toward the boarding gate, Denise reflected on the irony. The very man who had tried to strip her of identity had only highlighted the strength of it. Fire had reduced her card to ash, but her authority wasn't contained on a piece of plastic. It was written into every fiber of her being, every choice she had made to rise to the top. No lighter could erase that. The crowd parted respectfully, giving her space as though they recognized they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. She carried herself without arrogance, only purpose. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, the story was being told across social media. Headlines capturing the shocking reversal of power. Pilot burns woman's ID. Shocked when she reveals FBI director badge. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it a reckoning. Denise didn't care for the chatter. She hadn't acted for applause or vindication. She had acted because it was her duty, because allowing arrogance to go unchecked endangered more than just her dignity, threatened the very fabric of justice. She carried on, unaffected by the world's noise, focused only on the mission ahead. Behind her, the pilot was escorted out, his career crumbling in real time. He was no longer the man in control of lives at 30,000 feet, but a prisoner of his own hatred. His arrogance had blinded him, convincing him that he could act without consequence. But consequence had come swiftly and mercilessly. Denise didn't glance back, not once. She had learned long ago that the best response to injustice was not to dwell in its shadow, but to walk firmly in the light of truth, leaving prejudice behind to collapse under its own weight. On board the plane. Denise took her seat, gazing briefly out the window as the engines roared to life. The sun was beginning to set, streaking the sky with fiery colors. She thought of the symbolism fire had been used against her. Yet here was a fire that lit the heavens with beauty instead of destruction. The pilot had tried to consume her identity in flames, but life had reminded her that not all flames destroy. Some illuminate. She closed her eyes, centering herself, preparing mentally for the confidential mission awaiting her at her destination. The flight attendants, having heard the whispers of what happened, treated her with an extra measure of respect, though Denise neither demanded nor sought it. Respect, she believed, wasn't something to be forced. It was something earned by how one carried oneself through trials. For Denise, today had been just another test, one of many she had faced on her long road to becoming FBI director. She had passed not by retaliation, but by restraint, by choosing dignity over anger. That was the mark of true strength, and she wore it invisibly. More powerful than any badge, as the plane ascended into the sky, Denise allowed herself a rare smile. The storm had passed. The fire had burned out, and what remained was unshakable resilience. Somewhere below, the pilot would face the full weight of justice. Above, Denise soared higher, not just physically, but symbolically, a testament to what it meant to stand firm in the face of injustice. The world would remember the story, but she would remember only the lesson. No one could burn away the truth. Her journey continued, with purpose as clear as the horizon unfolding before her. Asterisk.